Is Sunday, January 2nd, 2023, and we're talking about as above, so below, imaging from the astral to the physical. So this is actually a topic near and dear to my heart. In the past few days, I found myself scripting a class, a 3-part class, about how I actually do magic. How I actually do magic, as opposed to the previous methods I've used that are written in my books. The methods in my books, they are tried, they are true. In some cases, I have done them since I was 16 years old, which would be the system you see in ritual magic for conservative Christians. It pretty much enshrines the Libri Artum system that I worked out for myself when I was a teenager. And I'd used it for, 26 years before I wrote it down in that book. So there is no shortage. However, as I have progressed, my own methodology has also progressed. And I've not really talked about it much. So today we're going to do that, and think of this as a sneak peek for the class, as well as a little bit of insight into how I actually practice and how I actually order my life. It may help you, it may not help you. The only way to know is to find out. I think the first thing for me, for how I practice in the current year, is that the core of my practice can actually be found in 3 of my books. The Magic of Effective Prayer, How to Pray the Rosary and Get Results, and The Practical Science of Creative Visualization. Now, if you have those on your bookshelf, you're going to notice something immediately. Those books are very, very thin. Magic of Effective Prayer, I think, has 64 pages. How to Pray the Rosary and Get Results, about 110. Practical Science of Creative Visualization is, I think, is like 84, 88, something like that. The reason those books are thin is that my practice is very, very simple. Now, this is a good point to ask yourself, and everybody has to ask themselves this. It's not, and there is no right or wrong answer. Is your focus on the results, or is your focus on complicated formulae, complicated ritual? Do you like doing all the astrological calculations? Thank God for the internet, making that so much easier than it was, say, 40 years ago when you had to get an ephemeris and just write everything out on a piece of paper. So are you in it because you like the astrological calculations, because you like all the theory, all the intellectual abstraction? And there's nothing wrong with it if you do. Or are you in it just to get your results? It's high church versus low church. And insofar as both work, there is nothing wrong with either approach. My approach is decidedly low church. Generally, I'm more focused on the result. And I found today's lectionary is an option. Now, today is actually the Feast of the Visitation. However, I struggled really hard to put something together to match the feast. Yet when I looked at the temporal reading, the 5th Sunday after Pentecost, it fits perfectly with today, where Jesus says, whoever is angry with his brother is already guilty of murder, and later on he says, whoever lusts after a woman has already committed adultery in his heart. He's talking about imaging on the inner planes, which can bring about the physical. So, it says this is one of the most basic processes of magic, specifically microcosmic magic. It's a really good time to talk about this. So as I mentioned, the way I do things is in those 3 books. It's not completely described in those 3 books, because your worldview is very important. The worldview is important. My worldview I've already talked about abundantly, so I need not talk too much about it here. Your belief system will affect how you approach this. So I'm not saying your belief creates your reality. I'm saying your belief can limit how you interact with your reality. There's a subtle difference there, and it's a pretty important one. So magic is the application of how we systematize our beliefs, is magic is the application of theology. Something I've consistently said for 25 years. Yet, how do we work this? In its simplest form, microcosmic magic is the process of bringing your desire out, from the inner planes out to the physical, or manifesting on whatever plane you wish to manifest. There are some things that you just wish to manifest on the astral. There may be some things you just wish to manifest on the mental. This may require some discussion of the inner planes as I first encountered the concept. As I first encountered the concept was from Ophiel's books on creative visualization and astral projection, where you have the physical, the etheric, the lower astral, the higher astral, the mental, and the causal. There are so many different paradigms and arrangements of the inner planes. I'm not going to go into that discussion. What that means to me is there is no hard and fast rule about how the planes are arranged. I'm perfectly okay with that. Because the thing is, you don't even have to believe in these as separate planes. You don't have to at all. You may be better off thinking of them as the process of manifesting from idea to thought to emotion to verbal expression to physicality. If you think of each of the planes as a process in manifestation, it helps too, because they work together. Now, this is where you're probably thinking, oh, no, you're going too close to the psychological model. This is bad. Well, first off, as I said in the description, if you are a Grimoire person or a trad dogmatist of any sort, you're going to be disappointed. The thing is, I don't really care about whether the spirit model or the psychological model is true. I think both are true. Yes, spirits exist. Yes, psychology exists. Therefore, my approach is a both and. And the fact is, I don't get too bogged down in theory. If the results happen, I don't get bogged down in theory. When you are beginning, theory is very important. Just like when you are beginning on your mystical path and beginning in your spirituality and your asceticism, theology is very important, especially dogmatic theology. The reason for this is that it gives you signposts. Signposts along the way to help you be sure you were on the right path. This is what helps prevent what the Eastern Orthodox refer to as prelest, or self-deception, which is very common amongst people seeking religious spirituality and amongst people seeking magic. To my mind, the two are one and the same. Magic is simply a side effect of spirituality. But a lot of people make that separation. I've been forcefully reminded about that in my comment section from time to time. So I'm addressing this right now before anybody jumps on that. Are we clear? Excellent. So back to this. When you are beginning, theory is extremely important because it helps you know whether or not you are on the right track, or if you're going off into the deep end and into the land of self-deception. Yet, as you progress in your practice, you start finding that formal theory is less and less important because your grasp of it becomes so intuitive that you already know whether you're off the deep end or you know whether you're on the right track. And the practice becomes more important. Some of you have heard me say in regards to just basic exoteric religion, culture is more important than doctrine. This is where it comes into play. And we can see this in the process of conversion. For a convert, when they are first converting, it's very important to learn doctrine. However, they remain a convert and they do not become a full Catholic until they fully assimilate on the cultural level. This gets into a major problem with convert apologists, why I find convert apologists and professional converts very annoying. They annoy the living hell out of me to no end. Because they're simply in that convert stage. It's all doctrine to them. They have not assimilated into the culture. They have not become full Catholics or full Orthodox. This is why Ortho-bros and Catho-bros, they come off as inauthentic. Because they're still in that beginner stage, but they're pontificating like they're experts. And yes, we cradles do find that annoying. In fact, converts who have fully assimilated, they're not converts anymore. The moment you fully assimilate is the moment you are no longer a convert. The reason I mention this, and I don't mention it to annoy anybody, I do not wish to insult anybody, because I'm talking about temporary stages. Temporary stages is that the convert stage is like the novice. It's the novice in their path. And it's very important to know whether they're on the right path or not. Just as you in your spirituality. This is the purgative life and maybe the early stages of the illuminative life. Yet, as you find yourself becoming more advanced in your practice, the culture becomes more important than the doctrine. By that I mean the praxis becomes more important than the theory. And as you find yourself more engaged in the practice, you find yourself more engaged in it, you find the theory and the theology, it's automatic. It's part of your subconscious. And your practice is what becomes more important. So to me, in my practice, when imaging from the astral to the physical, or basically imaging from the causal to the physical, what part of my practice is more important? Just freaking doing it. I have described, and in the system I have used since I was 16 years old, I'm 49 now. So we're talking about a 33-year acquaintance and a 33-year practice. I know the Libri Artum very well. In this system, I start with the declaration of intent. The declaration of intent, the invocation of divine forces, which may or may not take the form of the invocatio nominis Domini, the raising of energy, the invocatio prima, which is the first invocation, and so on and so on. Everything congruent with the sphere of the working, specifically with the planetary sphere of the working. Everything is congruent with that, the sphere and or the element. Everything's congruent. So, and that was a ritual framework. It was very direct, it was very to the point, because I was a teenager. I was definitely not a liturgist at the time. So, what happened? It worked. My very first operation, which was breaking up an abusive relationship, a statutory rape relationship to be specific, and it worked, and I had the support of the victim's mother in this, which may be part of how it worked. But the fact is, it worked. It gave me the success to refine what I was doing. It gave me the experience. I know what I am good at. I know what I am not good at. There are areas where I tend to specialize and areas where I don't. All well and good. And through that, I've come to the point where now I don't really think about the operation so much. I just do it. I just get in there and do it. I look at, okay, what is my target? What is my target desire? What are the circumstances that I have right now? And what are the circumstances that I need in for which this desire to manifest? And then how do I change them? To use a conversation I had with Wraith, one of the neo-pagan elders in the Columbus community. This is back in November of 2012. He's sitting around in my office and we're talking. He says to me, he gives me this advice. Look at it like a line of dominoes. Look at the domino that is closest to your objective. And then trace it back to the domino you were holding in your hand. Those aren't his exact words, but that's the gist of what he said to me. And that's pretty much what I do. That's what I do right there. I trace it back to the domino that is in my hand. And I look, okay, so how do I line up these dominoes, then knock over the line of dominoes to get from where I am to where I want to be? That's pretty much it. And then, is there something I need to adjust in my physical life in order to line up those dominoes to where I want to be? In essence, what I'm doing here is I am expanding my sphere of possession or my sphere of influence in order to create conditions more favorable for my desire to manifest. whether in my life or in the life of another. Because you can work to expand another person's sphere of possession or influence in order to help this manifest. But that usually works with education. You could also work to shrink your sphere or another person's sphere. So this goes both ways, and they can do the same to you. Remember, one of the bases of my entire paradigm, and the only hill that I am actually willing to die on, is libertarian free will. That is not to be confused with libertarian, the political philosophy. But this is just the philosophy of libertarian free will, is that free will is absolute and sacrosanct. That is where I stand. Magically, I also believe that all magic comes from God. Whether you wish to say the universe or the one to fit your paradigm, I don't mind one bit. Reason being, the Western worldview is so steeped in Christianity that you may say the universe, you may say the one, but the fact is you are most likely still coming from the Christian concept of God without knowing it. You just want to say something that doesn't sound so Christian-y to you. Fine, I get it. Use whatever name floats your boat. It doesn't bother me one bit. All magic comes from God. It all comes from God. And this actually fits with early 20th century scholars of comparative religion when they would say that religion is the public exercise. The public exercise of interacting with other levels of existence. Magic is the private exercise. Now, I only discovered that within the past year or two. So when I said 8 years ago in one of my early videos on the channel that when you are praying, you are practicing theurgic magic, I was right. This actually confirmed what I said. That may be confirmation bias on my part, but it doesn't matter. Your private exercise of your religion is essentially a magical act. Just let that sink in. So for me, I expand, whether through prayer, whether through expanding my sphere of possession and influence by physical action, and whether through self-education, gaining a skill set that I need, or whatever. Line up the dominoes to the one you have in your hand, and you adjust your situation to be more favorable to circumstances. Now this goes into the two schools of magical thought. One, that magic only improves your odds, the other being that magic breaks reality. Well, I think we've already established that I am a both-and kind of guy. Because when you adjust your paradigm to either-or, you limit your options. The either-or worldview is a worldview of limitation. A worldview of limitation, it's great when you want to put a very fine point on your objectives. It's great. But it's terrible when you're trying to figure out what your options are to begin with. I'm a both-and kind of guy. The spirit model and the psychological model are both true. It's a both-and, because spirits exist, psychology exists. It's a both-and. And the spirits interact with you based on your psychological state. Based on your psychological state, which we can translate to your mental and emotional state, they will interact with you. Whether they are honest with you, whether they play tricks on you, whether they manipulate you, is based on your mental state in relation to them. There are spirits who will do it just because they can. You don't need reason or rhyme, because their logic is not the same as our logic. Some don't follow any logic at all. It depends on the entity you're dealing with. We have to keep that in mind. There really isn't much in the way of unified theory for this. There really isn't. There's not much in the way of theory for everything, which is why different cultures, different traditions, and different individuals will give you different answers, even though they all share a basic common ground. There's a basic common ground because there are big picture principles that are universal. Yet, the small details, they tend to vary and sometimes wildly. I constructed my own system, as I said, when I was a teenager, based on reading, based on information I received in dreams, and then testing that information, and then based on results that I actually received and refining these results. This is probably why I am terrible at spoon feeding. I'm terrible at taking a basic beginner in from the ground up. Because the way I learned, yes, my father may have been like the really sought after guy at Mountaintop when I was a teenager. But if I ever asked him to teach me anything, he would say, "Here, read this book." That's all he would say. Figure it out for myself. When I was 15, I found my mother's old books in the basement, which were more serious. It was Ophiel, A.E. Waite, and a few others. Far more serious than the stuff my dad was handing me. Crystals and Love and Light, and and stuff like that. And Atlantis. 80s era New Age stuff. It was more serious. It was far more serious, and that's what formed the basis of me figuring out my own magical system. Now, I really wasn't allowed to read those books, but the fact that I found it, I wasn't allowed. And as my mother put it, you are not allowed to study the occult until the time comes that you would seriously be willing to take a bullet in the head for the name of Christ. That is how she said it to me. Well, I found them, and my parents were like, "You know what? It's too late now. Go ahead and let him read." I think my father was more troubled with it because there is something, I wouldn't call him a full-fledged New Ager, not by any means, but there is something in the New Age mentality that is really bothered by classical magic, or anything even approaching classical magic, anything approaching ritual, anything approaching the Grimoire spirit model, anything approaching traditional theology, anything approaching actual solid tradition. It really irks the hell out of them. I don't know why. All I know is that one night, this was in 2017, I was teaching a class on prosperity magic. This is the basis for the class I have on the channel. I was teaching a class on prosperity magic. I start talking about the spirit model, and one woman who's there, she gets in a fetal position chair, starts rocking back and forth on cancel, 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 cancel. And the context for this is that earlier in the class, she told me that when confronted with a thought, a limiting belief, or a bad thought, or something that's going to hurt her, she imagines cancel in big red letters in order to cancel that out from entering her psyche. That's the context. So she's doing this when I start talking about the spirit model. This is how much New Agers do not gel with traditional or classical magic at all. And I saw this in my father. I saw this in his reaction and his vehemence to it. You know what? I'm not too concerned about that. I'm not too concerned about that because I saw how he lived. I saw how he died. And what he did not help him. What I am doing is helping me. I am not living the way he lived. I am not going to die the way that he died. And every generation wants their children to live and die better than they did. Therefore, in the big scheme of things, I have found the better way than he did. And I will say that as objective truth. This is the same that I will tell you that Napoleon Hill was a better magician than Aleister Crowley. Why do I say this? And Crowley's probably not the best example because of the way he lived his life. Gareth Knight refers to it as drug addiction and magical impotence. Thelemites are going to be mad. That's okay, because Crowley did have some real gems. I am not a Thelemite. I am very much not a Thelemite. I'm probably an anti-Thelemite. But Crowley did have some real gems that were buried in his writings. Even a stopped clock was right twice a day. So yeah, I acknowledge when he used the stopped clock. However, Crowley died penniless. He died penniless. He died destitute. In fact, his following, as Francis King puts it, Crowley has more disciples dead than he ever did while living. Napoleon Hill, on the other hand, he used his teachings, and he died pretty comfortable. He had his following. There was literally a cult that used Think and Grow Rich as their holy book. I do not recommend this. I do not endorse this. Please do not form a cult that uses Magic of Catholicism as your holy book or anything else that I ever wrote. Please don't. But the fact is, Napoleon Hill, his method worked better for him than Crowley's method worked for him. Therefore, I will say that Napoleon Hill was a better magician than Aleister Crowley by empirical proof. I'm ranting, but I think that's important. We measure a magician by their results. We don't measure them by how good their ideas sound to our heads, or how well their ideas tickle our emotions. We measure ourselves as magicians by our results, not by how well the theory tickles our emotions. Look at how many people out there who may be 7th level Archmage or Magister Templi in whatever order they're part of, yet they're still living in their parents' basements. Now, if you're living in your parents' basement because your parents are ill and you're providing support, that's one thing. That's not a judgment against you. But if you're living there because you've never done anything with your life and they're supporting you, and all you're really doing is watching cat girls on your computer or whatever, I don't know. I honestly don't know what the kids are into these days. Then you're not a great and powerful magician that you claim to be. That's where I stand. If you're not getting results, you're not a magician. And what I find getting results is, well, zero tolerance for woo-woo. I grew up in an environment where woo-woo was plentiful. If you know anything about the New Age movement during the 80s, it was all woo-woo. I was there at the ceremony for the harmonic conversions. People are in this circle. They're talking all this love and light, all this feeling and stuff. When it came to my turn, I felt nothing. My exact words, because I felt nothing. I have an aversion to crystals for that exact reason, for being around all this woo-woo. How crystals can do everything from balance your chakras to cure cancer. No. A crystal is a crutch. My father actually said this in one of his metaphysics groups. A crystal is a crutch. And maybe I have expanded this to most of magical ritual. Most of ritual is a crutch. It's a crutch that we use in order to help amplify our intent, in order to help amplify our communication. And there's nothing wrong with that. If it is what works for you, then use it. Use it by all means. Use it and prosper with it. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But at the end of the day, the way we manage our lives and the actions that we take are what shepherds the process. From the causal to the mental, to the higher astral, to the lower astral, to the etheric, to the physical. Or from the realm of idea, to the realm of thought, to the realm of emotion, to the realm of utterance, to the realm of physicality. It is our actions, beginning with how we live our lives on the day-to-day, going to how we arrange our lives, to how we interact with the different realms of existence. And again, many of you may accuse me of leaning in on the psychological model. Maybe I am a little bit. Maybe I'm not talking with the spiritual model enough to your liking. The fact is, I'm talking about both. Because that manifestation from idea, it begins with an idea. What your desire begins with an idea inside of you. And your mental, emotional state begins, it is part of how that shepherds out. If you don't have a desire for it, in idea, in mind, in heart, and if your words are not congruent with the idea, the mind, and the heart, then how is your communication with the spiritual levels going to help? It may even hinder. Because whoever you're talking to may detect that, hey, this person is insincere. This person doesn't really want it. So why should I help somebody who doesn't really want this? Do you see where I'm going? It's all interconnected. All of these things are related. It's all related. This is the principle of oneness. This is the principle of unity in action. It's the principle of the Yetziratic text of the ninth path taken in reverse. The ninth path being the Sephirah Yesod, being the place where all of those things that were formerly unified are divided into the divisions that we now perceive. Keep that in mind. So when we reach through our spirit communication, when we reach from the ideas from the realm of idea to thought to emotion to utterance to physicality, we're reaching in that primal unity, and we are forming what it is we desire. We're forming this blueprint in that primal unity, so it will manifest, and then will become distinct from the unity as it reaches the sphere of the moon. Whether manifestation comes through the 10 Sephiros, or the 7 planetary spheres, plus the crystal, plus the sphere of fixed stars, plus the Empyrean sphere, the Empyrean heaven. However we classify however we theorize, or however we paradigmize our process of manifestation, the process is the same. And we're shepherding it from unity to individuality. We shepherd it. So again, it doesn't really matter which model you're using so long as the process is being observed. So long as the praxis is working the process. And that in a nutshell is how I operate. Now when I do the class, I'm going to go into a lot more detail about this. But that's the basics. The visualization, which you don't even need to be a visual thinker in order to employ visualization. In my creative visualization book, I give methods that you can use even if you have absolute aphantasia. Even then. So you don't even need to visualize, but you do need to keep, it helps, but you do need to keep your mind, your emotions, and your life and your interaction with the spiritual realms congruent with one another. And your utterances are very important on this. Because you may say, I desire this, please God, give me this, or spirit so-and-so, I conjure you for this. But if in your day-to-day life you keep saying, I can't, I won't, I never, you're self-sabotaging. Because if you're shepherding from the realm of ideas, the realm of physicality, the realm of utterances, the realm of your words can block that. It is in the way. It's one of those gates you must pass. So you must keep your words congruent with your desire. You don't have to believe in yourself. You don't have to believe in yourself in order to succeed. You just don't have to sabotage. Let me rephrase that. You don't have to believe in yourself in order to succeed. You just have to keep from sabotaging yourself. That's pretty much what I have found has worked for me. Even in the midst of setbacks. And 2017, for example, was a very horrible year. 2016, for Thavma, it was going great. I had finally found success. I had finally figured out the formula that I spent 42 years trying to learn. I finally figured it out. I was happy. I was jubilant. I was ecstatic. February of 2017, I got DMCA'd by Libri Editrice Vaticana. I talk about this on the blog. I got DMCA'd, that is the Vatican's publishing house, as represented by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. I got DMCA'd. It turns out I translated something that they do not want the public to have access to. They really didn't like the idea that I translated it in the first place. And to be honest, my translation could have been better. I worked from the Latin. However, I only had part of the Latin text, so I did the rest by comparing what Latin I had to the Italian version, that the Italian Council of Catholic Bishops actually puts on the internet. They put it out there for the public to see it. This is why every time I talk about it, I always give a link to the Italian text. It's basically flipping the bird. It's flipping the bird to the fact that the English text is supposed to be secret, only accessible to priests and to those faithful whom the local bishop sees fit. It's like the Index of Prohibited Books was put back on track. Okay, I'm rambling. Apologies. My point is, because that happened, because I didn't yet have the mental toughness to weather this storm. And that was a major part of what was doing so well. I didn't have the mental toughness. I free-falled. I went from that. I went to a number of other issues. I went to a person that I was in a business relationship with, showed his true colors, like really showed his true colors. I don't know why. A year later, he tried to give an explanation, which quite frankly, I don't believe, but I don't care. I don't care. And I almost just shut dogma down in October of that year. However, I stuck with it. I rebuilt. I expanded. And this is where, and the two things I think that I did right, the best two decisions I ever made were, first, to have nothing to do with that person I just mentioned ever again. I walked away. And second, being interviewed on Glitch Bottle in May of 2018. That was the bounce back point. Because that expanded my sphere of efficacy and my sphere of influence. It expanded it to such a point that everything was rebuilding again. It was rebuilding. It was growing. Now, I did not do any conscious magical operation in order to bring Alex in my life. Alex came into my life of his own. He watched an interview I did on Deeper Down the Rabbit Hole. This is just based on stuff he said to me before the interview. On Deeper Down the Rabbit Hole, he mentioned a few things. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about this. Excellent. And for some reason, my long, rambling answers somehow caught on, and somehow it got people's attention. That's how it went down. Alex, I'm very grateful to you. And what this means is that even when you're not trying, if your desire is there, God may send people into your life that will help you. People that want to help you. God may send people into your life that believe in what you're doing. Another example of this is the Handbook of Exorcism and Deliverance. This is November 29th. I'm getting ready to publish it. And you know that depending on the book, sometimes I will have a very democratic process of cover selection. I'll start with 4 potential covers, and I let people vote on which cover they prefer. Now, this actually serves 2 purposes. The first purpose is that I'm not always the best chooser of what art pops. I know what pops for me. I don't know what's going to pop for most people. And when you're selling books on Amazon, people do judge by the cover. They want to see a pretty cover that just resonates with them. So this gives me an insight into what's going to resonate with the greatest number of people. The other benefit is it gives everybody a chance to be involved in the process. And I want that. I want people to be involved in the process. This is not a monolithic thing. And so, of the 4 covers I put out there for a Handbook of Exorcism and Deliverance, I'm actually kind of embarrassed by cover number 4. There were about 11 of them. I had 2 people actually sent in some really nice ones. Unfortunately, they got turned down for the image of St. Michael that's there. But on one of them, okay, during the original process, I remember this. Annalise, she looked at these, Okay, and if you're watching this, shout out to you, Annalise Antoinette. She wrote a fairly long comment where she read me down up one side and down the other. Look, this is not the quality of work you produce. You do better than this. You can do better. In essence, the impression I got was that she believed in me more than I believed in myself. And I had some private messages along this effect, nowhere near as intense as what she wrote, and I thank her for this. Nowhere near as intense. But what I realized that there are people out there who want me to succeed more than I do. How does this have to do with magic? What it has to do with, this has to do with the social dimension of your magical practice. Surround yourself with people who want you to succeed. Surround yourself with people who, even if they don't, I don't mean actively want you to succeed, but who are not actively sabotaging you. People who are not jealous, people who are not envious. Remember, envy is the cause of the malocchio. If you look behind me on the bottom image of the Blessed Mother, there's a mati down there. There's a mati hanging from it. The mati, it's a Greek amulet against the evil eye. It's synonymous with the monocornude in Italian, or the corno. Actually, the corno also has a few other purposes. A few other purposes, but I'm not getting into that right now. It's protection against the malocchio, or was it Ivascagna? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Greek speakers, feel free to correct me in the comments. My point is, the people you surround yourself with are also a part of enriching and growing your magical practice. So there is the internal element, which is the shepherding from idea to physicality. There's that internal element, which is your mindset, your heart set, your spirit set. There is the external element, which is how you live your life on the day-to-day, how you structure your practice, how you pursue your practice. And then there is the social aspect, which is the people you allow into your life, the people with whom you surround yourself, inner circle, intermediate circle, outer circle. Think of this as a solar system. Think of your relationships as a solar system where you are the sun and everyone else has an inner, an intermediate, and outer orbit around you. And then you have a Kuiper belt and an Oort cloud after that. Think of it that way. Think of your social interactions that way. And be very careful who you admit into your inner circle. I have found this in church planting. I found this in running a business. I found this just in life. Surround yourself with people who will help you. As my mother told me when I was young, associate with yourself with people who will pull you up, not people who will bring you down. This is not opportunism. It's that if you have people in your inner circle who are envious, who are jealous, who feel bad because not because they can't bring themselves up, they can't do for themselves, but because they refuse to open their eyes, expand their worldview, and do for themselves. Their envy and their bad mojo, it will affect you. So there is a social aspect to magic as well. It's who you have in your inner circle. I am very happy to have people in my circle who believe in me, and I believe in them in return. I believe in them. I support them. I 100% want to see each and every one of them succeed in whatever endeavor they are undertaking. It's mutual. It's not just associate with people who believe in you. You have to believe in them too. This creates a mutual network. It's a mutual network. A mutual, not necessarily understanding, but it's a two-way network of positivity that flows back and forth. You want the positivity. You want that back and forth. You don't want the negativity. You don't want bad mojo. You don't want that. So yeah, even some of the things that law of attraction people say, and again, a stop clock is right twice a day, Even some of the things that law of attraction people say are correct up to a point. The problem with law of attraction and with its religious cousin, with its religious sibling, prosperity gospel, the two actually come from the same root, which is the New Thought movement of the late 19th, early 20th century. I'm sorry, if I wanted to look at those ideas, I would actually go to the root. Give me Elizabeth Town, give me Wallace Deloy Wattles, and so on and so forth. In fact, Wattles is really good reading. He's quite the interesting character. He really is, but he's very interesting reading. So, just keep in mind, he's working with. He wrote in 1910. He died in 1911. So he is working with ideas. He's working with language and frameworks that we would consider obsolete today. Read him in context, and you can get a lot out of him. Back to my point. I think we've covered quite a bit of ground. We're 46 minutes in now. So the way I practice magic, and I'm going to go into this in a lot more detail in the class. I'm going to build this from the ground up. And this is why I had so much trouble talking about this in the series, because I'm not a grimoirist. Yes, I do use aspects of the manuals, with which the grimoires share a lot of affinity. But I am not a grimoirist. I am not a trad dogmatist. Now, my theology is very much traditional Roman Catholic. It's very much traditional Roman Catholic, even though I have intended to go to the other side of Trent. I find medieval Catholicism to be more real than the post-Tridentine model, which is very top-down. It was top-down as a matter of survival to survive the threat of Protestantism. And only to survive the threat of Protestantism because secular governments were starting to take up the Protestant cause. And when the people with the swords and the guns take up the cause of somebody you've declared an enemy, trouble is brewing. And up until 1648, there was quite a bit of trouble. The Wars of Religion, which ended in the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, which most likely is what led to the Scientific Revolution and the Enlightenment, because people by about 100 years, people got sick and tired of fighting with their neighbors just because they believed differently. There had to be a better way. Whether or not this was the better way, I don't know. I think that parts of it were the better way, because when we put aside our religious squabbling, look at all the progress we made as humanity. Look at all the progress Western civilization has made. Look at the technology that we've had. Look at the social advances that we had up until about 1910 or so. Look at those advances. Look at that. I think that it was a partial right track, even though the Enlightenment carried within itself the seeds of its own collapse and of its own destruction, of its own self-destruction, which is something that we are in the process of seeing now. That is a total tangent that has no place in this video, however. My point being, my magical practice, it's not very dogmatic. It does not emphasize the theoretical very much. It emphasizes the practical. You spend enough time with the theory, you come to internalize it. Spend enough time, you also come to critique it in the light of empirical results. What I find in a lot of books tends to be woo-woo. And what I find in my life tends to be, this is what works, this part is woo-woo, take what works, cancel out the woo-woo. And even law of attraction has things that work. The whole raise your vibration thing, it's really, when they say raise your vibration, what they're really talking about, it's like they seem to present it as keep yourself in a high emotional state. Nobody can do that all the time. That gets you to toxic positivity very quickly. But raise your vibration as keep your outer and inner planar alignment congruent. Keep your internal, external, and social alignment congruent. That works. Put in the action. And yes, physical exercise is part of that action. It's part of your exterior, part of your day-to-day. How can you enjoy the benefits you're manifesting for any period of time if you are not healthy? How can you enjoy it? So you should do something to keep yourself in at least reasonable health within the boundaries that you have. Within the boundaries that you have. I'm not saying you should be like totally fit, you should be totally jacked. I'm not saying that at all. Because some people just cannot. But do the best you can, to the best of your ability, to maintain your physicality or get yourself back in shape, which is something I'm working on. I've always had some type of exercise, but it hasn't been very much. I'm working on my physicality. I am. I came into a realization about a week and a half ago. It scared the, I'm not willing to share any details. I'm just going to say that it scared the hell out of me. And so I am working to get myself back under control. It's basically a combination of some bad habits I acquired in reaction to how I grew up as a child, plus a major setback to my self-confidence that happened in 2006 that I never really got over. I never really got over, and that I've only recently come to grips with. It does affect my ability in certain parts of in magical work in certain areas, but definitely not in all areas. So that's what's going on. So I am working to get myself into shape. I am working. I could probably do more, but baby steps. My point is, that's part of the external ordering. The more you work, and they're all related, the more you work on the internal, the more you will find on the external. The more you'll find the external coming into alignment. The more you work on the external, the more you will find the internal coming into alignment. Because as above, so below also means as within, so without. And the more you work on the social and develop those mutually supportive networks where people believe in you and you believe in them, the more it will help you to order the external and the internal. So all of this is arranged to be mutually beneficial. And the social, the external, and the internal, when it comes time to look at what line of dominoes you have, or to look at where you have to expand or contract your sphere, your various spheres of influence, efficacy, possession, i.e. your sphere of availability, when it comes time, you have that ability. So my final point is, magic is not just the studying of old tomes. It is not just the dogmatic following of what this tradition says, or that tradition says, or this book, or that author. It is not the OCD conducting of certain rituals every day with obsessive attention to detail. It is not that. Magic, properly understood and properly executed, is the interior, the exterior, and the social ordering of one's life in such a way as to be conducive to positive growth, positive fulfillment, and positive results in an ever-growing and an ever-expanding fashion. And may the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, keep your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Amen.